Perhaps you have wondered at some point why you have this attraction for the Gothic, for the dead, the uncanny, the strange, the scary films, the unknown, the supernatural, all these topics, all these elements. And maybe you are the one out in your group that likes all these things, and you kind of never really have managed to explain why you have this passion for all these topics and all these themes. And maybe there is someone in your group that is like you, but you feel a bit like even embarrassed to say what you feel like. It's okay when is this time of the year, when we are in Halloween, or we celebrating some kind of costume party, where you can just kind of be a little bit more yourself and explore openly all those faces, all those sides of you. But it tends to be quite an uncomfortable space. And even though there are many people studying the Gothic in the UK and in the States, not so much in Spain and in other countries, it tends to be the space of the dead, for example, and trauma and grieving, and the space of the uncomfortable, the unavoidable as well, because we're all going to die one day. It's something that only a few, or a few, maybe small amount of people are really interested in, and interested in talking about it openly. A lot of people, you may find that they avoid the subject, or they just go through life without talking much about their life and death experiences. And I think it's very important that we have these, I want to invite you to analyze what's going to be from now on the channel, because we're going to go from In Search of the Gothic, which is something that I'm still going to be doing on my website, on my courses, on a one-to-one when you want to when you want to talk to me. But it's something that I want to really change that banner, that name, and because for personal reasons, and where I am at the moment is this what I want to talk to you about. I started in the Gothic for some reasons I will tell you in a minute, but then as time has gone by, things have happened, life has happened, I feel more the necessity of being in this space from a slight different angle. So we're gonna be going from this In Search of the Gothic to another space more that we're gonna be called the Gothic Descent into death and the unconscious. And I want to take you now to go back in time and think about your own experience as a child. When was that first time that you encountered death? Because I do remember when at an early age, my mom used to talk about an auntie that died of cancer, and she would stroke my face and say, when I was only 2, she would say, "You'll be my youngest daughter's best friend." And that's how it was for a while. We were really good friends for a long time. And then later on, when I was 8, I remember another family member dying, and I was more aware about it this time because I was older. What was very shocking for me was my dad's reaction towards this death, and how he actually he cried, and it was the first time I saw my dad crying. I've got my cat walking in, so let's hope she doesn't disturb, because she just wants to be scratched, and she's moving the light. She is. Yes, she's come back in. I kicked her out before, but she's come back. Hello, princessa. So it's very important that we go back in time, and we have this thinking of memorizing, remembering how many times we've encountered death in different forms. And I'm not only talking about the physical death, I also want you to think about those moments of transition, those moments where you felt lost because you've lost a job, maybe you've lost a part of your identity due to a relationship that was a little bit toxic, or that had some elements that make you dissociate. We could talk about narcissism. Well, there are other channels that do that very well. I wouldn't be able to, but We could talk about shadows, and we could talk about archetypes to talk about those. But it's important how, even though we live in societies that we're trying to avoid the ugliness of life, this other side, it's there, we can avoid it. So in a way, this is what I want to do with the Gothic Descent. What I'm trying to do with you, and I want to invite you to do this journey with me, is to go deeper in this existential analysis through the Gothic Jungian lens of how we can actually cope with these moments in life. Not just, as I said, not just as the physical death, but also transition and all those moments that we feel lost for whatever reason that is, and to see how this is being used not just in Gothic literature, but also in artistic productions where there are Gothic elements, and that could go from TV shows and its shape and form, it could go from books, it could go in anything. It could even be something that you notice around you when you go out for a walk. So we're going to be concentrating on those more, and we're going to try to give explanation and to even find comfort in something so unavoidable as it is, and certain as it is, death. So if this is something that you can find interesting, that you think could be actually be useful because you're in a moment of transition and you don't have enough tools, and it's a very good way for to follow this self-recognition path and to learn more about yourself, to go through life a bit happier. At the end of the day, in the Gothic we find a lot of light. So if this is something that can interest you, then I'm inviting you to this video, and this is for you, my friend. Hello Gothic friend, welcome to Gothic Land. This is Alice, and welcome to episode 16, where we are going to talk about from the fear of death to transformation, because we are going to be doing changes in the channel, as I said in the introduction, and these changes have to do a lot with my own experience with death, and my own experience with transition, and my own experience with loss, but also how I see how this is so important for other people, and how there's not enough information available. There are a lot of people talking about death now in a lot of very interesting spaces, scientific spaces, philosophical spaces for sure. Jungian Psychology, they talk about death and the transition. So it's a space that you need to kind of know where to go to talk about it. And I think it's very important when we're talking about the Gothic that we address death, because it's like the main guy, is the main character in the Gothic. For me, at least it's like that. And when I talk about the Gothic, I'm not just talking about Gothic literature. I see the Gothic as a mode, as academics say, they've been saying for a while, because it affects a lot of different disciplines, it affects other areas. I mean, even in science, you go to science and you cannot just run away from death, because at the moment that we analyze our cells, and there are cells that die every day because they need to, otherwise it wouldn't be good for us. So it's part of life. We need to accept it as it is, but it's not easy to accept death for us human beings, because we have this way of seeing life that we get very attached. I mean, there's a lot of things going on, and I don't want to be going off the tangent here, but what I want to to address first is I'm just trying to create a little bit of awareness. I'm going to take you live to memory lane, and I want you to think about those, as I was saying in the introduction, about the beginning of your own experience with death, and how that was and what that looked like. How did that affect you? How from that moment you did or did not do certain things, or you saw life in a way. I mean, there are even people who take certain jobs because of an experience that they had with death, an encounter, and those are crucial moments for people's lives, professionally, personally, and it's very important that we are aware of it. But it's also very important for me to see where all this comes from, and how the Gothic is that space where we can actually explore all this, and more if we do that under the Jungian lens. So that's why I call this the Gothic-Jungian lens, the way I look at the Gothic, because and life and existentialism. Who am I? Why am I here? What's the purpose? And some people might say that these are questions that come after certain experiences in life, but I think some of us have always had this need to know who we are, what we're doing here, what's the purpose of everything. I do remember having this feeling for a long time, in even since I was very young, and nothing really important or serious had happened to me. But other people live with death every day. I mean, you can just think about wars that are going around the world, and the fear and the having to survive and not knowing if the next minute you're going to be alive or dead. And obviously from all these experiences we get the literature, we get the productions later on, we get artists expressing what other people cannot express, either because they either traumatized with it, they don't know what to do with it, or because they just want to bury it because it's too much. So there's a lot going on in the space. So if I've my experience, we could all say that I could say to you, from the moment I closed my language school is when this channel was born. In a way, it was out of a tantrum, because I was feeling like, okay, I had done English philology and I dedicated a big part of my life to have a language school, to teach the language. But when you become an English philologist, you're not just a linguist, you're also someone who can talk about literature, someone who can edit texts about literature, academic fiction, non-fiction. And I felt a bit less with less authority in this space than in the language space, because of, I suppose, the practice as well, and because I didn't continue my university studies, because I didn't quite like the options and I didn't have enough options. I was already a mature student when I started doing my degree, so I chose other things in life, but I could never really put on one side my passion for the Gothic. That's always been there. That's been there since I was little. I loved ghost stories. I loved watching with my mom programs. We watched a lot of films. We watched a lot of series. We watched a lot of programs. I was even more inquisitive than my mom about the supernatural and about the afterlife. And she would look at me and say, well, you don't really believe in a God, but then you believe in ghosts. We would have these conversations, and as I'm growing older, I'm realizing how rich those conversations were, but also I'm realizing how much information I was still missing, and how I could just formulate one or two theories. And now as an adult, and after things have happened to me, and maybe the fact that these things have happened, it doesn't mean that they had to happen, so I'm here. It's more, they happened and therefore I'm here. But we try to find, a lot of times, listen to other podcasts and experts and psychologists, and when they say, yeah, it's not really right to say that things happen for a reason, maybe we should really say things happen to us, there's not really a real reason, but because of those things happening, we change. Even last Saturday, I do a course on applied Jung online, and we were talking about synchronicities. And there's something I've been reading when studying Jung as well, that synchronicities and these events that happen to us, are they really do they just only affect us, or are these experiences that we also have an impact on? And then we can't avoid talking about consciousness and the unconscious. And now there are more and more doctors, more professionals, and in the medical area, that can't avoid any longer talking about the topics of death, the unconscious, the consciousness, how far this consciousness goes. How can it be that people who were clinically dead all of a sudden come back, and when all of a sudden, after whatever they do to them, they come back and they have this recollection of experiences of what was going on in the theater while they were operated? And there are a lot of things that doctors can't avoid any longer, and there are some who are still saying that's just the mind playing games and tricks on us. And there's another big amount of the community that of professionals that are taking it very seriously, and they're saying there's more than meets the eye. We need to investigate. We just can't keep ignoring it any longer. So that's super important. So if I tell you the story of there are some crucial moments in my life that took me to be in this space and talking to you about it, even though I had that discomfort, because it's not the space where I feel more comfortable with, as it's not the language. And I feel that I have, as I said before, I have maybe less credit to talk about it. But this is only my perception, because really, if something gets to us, if something touches us, I think anybody can talk about anything, for as long as you're talking about it from this personal point of view. And if then after that you have some knowledge that you can back up your theories and what you're learning, then that's fantastic. But nobody should take away our perception of what we believe is true and what we believe is real for us. So the Gothic for me has always been something that I would have loved my teachers to have told me more about it, not just when it was the topic of the day to read a ghost story for this time of the year, but around the rest of the year, because talking about horror stories, talking about the Gothic, brings us also topics that they normally don't come up in normal conversation. So it's like a great excuse to talk about those things, and it's part of who we are as well. So at a personal level, I did have, going before I explain this story, when we talk about deaths as well, are we talking about what's more important? Yeah, people tend to say, well, this death is more important than other death. And we always are comparing things. And this is horrible. We shouldn't really compare this death is worse than other. Any kind of loss is terrible in itself. And we shouldn't be comparing it with anything else. Because every person feels different as well. And for some people, the same event, the same experience, depending on how they see it, going back to the synchronicity we were talking about on Saturday in this course, is that yes, things can change us, or we can decide for these things not to affect us. And how we call them and the meaning we give them, the vocabulary that we use, that also has an impact on those experiences. So yeah, now going back to my experience of, as a mother, having lost two pregnancies. I can't say two children, because in one of them I had two bags, one was empty. So for me, that's like another one that was almost there but didn't quite happen. But the first one was an ectopic pregnancy. An ectopic pregnancy, for those who don't know, is when the egg gets fertilized, but it gets stuck in the tube, in the fallopian tube, and it doesn't go to the uterus. So the embryo doesn't grow in the uterus. So my embryo was growing in my fallopian tube, and therefore it was so big that it exploded. So I bled internally, and I had to be operated, life or death operation, because I was bleeding inside. Now, unfortunately, I can't say that I saw any tunnels. I didn't have an out-of-bodily experience or anything like that, but it's true that I just wanted to get rid of the pain, because the physical pain was excruciating. And at the same time, I was really sad because I knew that I was going to lose that embryo. Whether it was in the fallopian tube or in my stomach or in the right place, I didn't care. For me, that was a life that was growing and that was gonna stop growing, whatever it was. In the second pregnancy, I had to have a termination because the other embryo that was there, as I said, there was two. One bag was empty, but the other one, there was something there, and it wasn't growing enough. So it was growing, but there was no heartbeat. And that, for me, that thought was very Frankensteiny, because I used to think at that time, and it was around this time of the year as well, I used to think how Frankenstein all this is. We need all these body parts, all these cells to come together in an harmonious way to produce a human being. And when that doesn't happen, we don't appreciate it. When a pregnancy goes well, we don't appreciate it, and we don't think of all these little things. Yeah, we see this week it has eyes, this week the embryo has a heartbeat, this week the fingers are developing, because we've become, some of us, obsessed with the evolution, and we want to know what's growing and what does it look like when it's inside. Now I have two sons now. I've got the eldest son that we had before had all the miscarriages, and then the rainbow baby who now is 10. But those experiences were terrible, and I didn't leave them the same way as my husband, for obvious reasons. They were happening in my body, not in his body, but the pain is different because of he was also suffering for me. He didn't want to lose me, so the time of the ectopic pregnancy was like, for him, was like, we're not having any more, we're not risking losing you, because there's always it's higher risk that it can happen again. In a way, kind of, I had that emptiness, and I convinced him over time that I wanted to try again, and even the next time went wrong, and then we did try the third and last time, that, thank God, went well. But it's the mind is a strange thing, and sometimes it goes on its own tangent and it doesn't understand any logic. It's just a feeling, it's just an intuition, it's just whatever you want to call it. I did write about this, and in fact it's in an anthology, a diary for mothers, called, it's in Spanish, Diario para Madres Escritoras, so a diary for mothers who write, and I tell that story there. And so that was my personal experience with having carried death in my body and having lived it like that. Even the day we were going to get a second opinion about the second pregnancy, on the way there was in the sky this massive white cloud that had the shape of an embryo, and I thought, this is a sign of something, and I was hoping there was going to be a sign for this baby to continue, because it was well formed, but it didn't happen. Maybe that was a sign that I had to wait for another one, and then it was it was our second living son that made it. I don't know, because at the time that would have been interpreted as a synchronicity if I had had the tools, if I had known about Carl Jung and analytical psychology. Maybe that was a way of saying, this is what you're carrying, the synchronicity of, this is what is inside of you right now. And it was kind of exteriorized outside in the clouds. It was very powerful, and that was a very sad period of my life, and a period I will never forget. A few years down the line, in 2018, my husband suffered an ictus, which is a type of a stroke, and then the day after the stroke, that he was thankfully, fortunately, the doctors did a very good job here in Belviche, in Barcelona, and he survived the stroke, and he got, little by little, with time, he recuperated most of the mobility, the speech, everything, because the brain being plastic, and that actually, the plasticity of the brain helps a lot of the parts to recover. But they found out that he also had an important heart issue, and that's what he's been not been able to recuperate from since then, and that has caused him a lot of health issues. In fact, the main characteristic of this condition is that he's got many arrhythmias, and his life changed overnight. So for him, there were a lot of transitions, there were a lot of grieving moments for me as well, and for us as our kids too, as a family. We talk about this regularly at home because we all grieve differently, and the health problem is happening to him, but we all suffer the grieving consequences of his condition, because we all would love to have a daddy that didn't have to stop every 2 minutes because he gets tired, or when he gets a palpitation, he doesn't know if it's going to be another arrhythmia. Like the last one he had was a really serious one, and he almost died, and he had a cardiac arrest, and he had a sudden death. But then he has a defibrillator, and that brought him back to life. So thanks to technology, which we could see as very Gothic as well, the ghost in the machine almost, the good ghost in the machine and the control one in the machine actually brought him back. But if this was happening in 1700s, it would be science fiction for them, and it would be ghostly. So we would see the ghosts and the Gothic in what we have now. So we can get rid of it. So it's a space that we get reminded of regularly, and for us it's daily. For us and for many other people, maybe you are one of these people. Maybe you have a condition, maybe you're living with someone with a chronic disease, or maybe you do have a disease and you are facing death every day, and you're having to come to terms, and then you're having to live in a society where people don't really want to talk about this, and they put you towards one side because you become the other, which is one of the topics that we can talk about, that the Gothic addresses so well. So it is everywhere, and your ideas of life, your concept about life changes when something like this happens. I remember the first time my husband came back from hospital from having had the ictus and everything, that I thought of zombie films, not because it looked like a zombie, which in a way he was very scared. He was in shock because it was a sudden from being okay to not being okay, and it was quite sudden for him. But I thought, if for me the soul is in the brain, I used to think for a while that the soul must be in the brain, because his whole personality changed from this experience. Also because there was having to relearn certain things and keep his brain practicing certain things. Even he lost the speech of one of the languages. They kind of started coming back because he's English, and the second language he learned was French and German, and then the last one he learned was Spanish, Catalan, which is what we speak in Catalonia. So he kind of lost a bit, he forgot a bit about the Catalan, and then little by little the others started coming back, but the main language, the mother tongue, it was the one that stayed, thankfully. But in other cases, the neurologist told us at the time that some people forgot their mother tongues, and they could only speak in the third or the second language or the fourth language, which is quite interesting as well. So the mind on its own carries all these, so Gothic in the sense that it's like a change of personality. Your identity changes. So that's why I used to think that the soul must be in the brain, like some historians in the past, philosophers, I can't remember who said that. There was a different periods of time in history where we located the soul in different places of the body. But I mean, I'm kind of laughing, but it's not funny. The fact that we go through all these experiences, having lost the business due to his illness, a change in the market, but also after the pandemic, we had to reinvent ourselves. So then I find myself in the space of the Gothic, not knowing very well what I'm doing, but as things are happening and they're taking place, I think everything is pointing out that this is a very important change that we need to do in the channel. A change where I realized, at least in the Spanish videos, that people really like archetypes, people really like self-development. They want to know more about how to learn about themselves through the Gothic and this Jungian lens, so bringing this psychological angle to it. Something that I've been, I've done a course, I've got a master's degree on Jungian psychology now, so it's something that I can talk about with more confidence, but it's something I can say that I'm not an expert of. So I would always recommend you to check, read, talk to an analyst when we start talking about certain topics here. So this is the example of more or less the main characteristics or the main reasons why I wanted to do this change, and I think it's very important that the channel goes through this change. I think it's just important. I just lost a bit the thread because I want to talk to you about three main aspects or three main pillars that we're going to be covering when going to the Gothic Descent, and helping you transition through your grieving moments as well, and understanding what death means and in the Gothic space. So the first pillar, that these come from my own learnings, but I think they resonate with you as well. They will probably resonate when, I hope that as I was talking about all these, you've been thinking of your own experiences as well. But you could probably agree with me that it's very important to understand the fear of death and the unknown. What does that mean to us? And how, since the immemorial, human beings, we have expressed our fear of what they didn't understand, or what we still don't quite understand. As I said before, all the studies that are coming out now are precisely because of this need to understand. And for me, Gothic literature is one of the genres that best reflects this invitation to confront what makes us most uncomfortable, which is death, fear, everything that's in the unknown, the unconscious, all those parts of us that we don't quite understand yet, and things that are going out in the world that we don't understand yet, that affect us as individuals. And then I want to talk about why Jungian psychology, I'll be addressing this in some videos, why Jungian psychology is so relevant to the Gothic. And for me, I find that analytical psychology is the one that best explains what goes in Gothic texts, and vice versa. Gothic texts are a very good example, or can be used as a way to talk about Jungian psychology, because it's where we find all those theories, we find them in the practice. At the end of the day, in analytical psychology, we have that is through writing, whether it's writing dreams or writing what we thinking at the moment, making sure that we realize what's happening at the time, is that through art we can also explore all those parts of our unconscious mind, the psyche. And the Gothic is very good for this because it's a space that does not constrain. It does free us from, the more pure, and the more, and I mean pure in the sense of the least we try to polish those thoughts and those ideas and those feelings. Maybe the ideas, yeah, so people can understand them when they're reading them, but the more raw are those feelings that we are exploring, the closer we are to what's going on in our unconscious mind. And I think that's very important, that's crucial as well. And that's why I want to talk about, the videos. You're going to see a lot of Jungian psychology there. And the third pillar, the third aspect, is the written expression and the analysis of the unconscious. And for me, this is very important because, and I want to invite you to do this exercise as much as you can, because when you're writing is cathartic, writing is therapeutic, and writing your dreams down, writing your thoughts down, you can choose the time of the day, but it's important to be present. Or even writing stories, ghost stories that are connected to moments in your life where you went through a transition, where you felt that this was suffocating you, which is what happened to me one night when in October in 2018 precisely, I felt this suffocation, and with everything that was going on, and in the end I ended up writing 10 short stories before Halloween. And that's actually an invitation for you on Medium this month, and you're still on time when you watch this if you want. And if not, you can even outside the time, you could send me those stories outside the fact that it's Halloween. We can do that again later on if you want in the year. Let's see how it goes first. But I did that for myself, and it was a really good exercise because it helped me to come to terms with what I was feeling, and it came out in the shape of stories. And what was happening in my brain, it was great to see how that felt. So this is an invitation, and we're going to be talking about how to use these writing techniques and things that I've been trying myself, so then you can also try them and you can see how they're actually helping you. But we will be elaborating more on that and that. So basically this is what I wanted to do with today's video. So if it's something that you think you're gonna be finding beneficial, it's very important that that you take notes if you've learned anything today, but also that what I would like you to do also is to say if this is something that can interest you, with subjects, topics, or that we have some kind of communication between us, because sometimes it's very difficult to talk on the camera and then I don't see their faces, so sometimes I'm just kind of guessing what's going to be the reaction. But it'll be very interesting for me to have some kind of community where we can exchange our experiences, our views. It's not a place to say this is right or wrong, because we're talking about feelings and we're talking about how we perceive the world, how we change the world as well as the world changes us. And it's about to explore all the binomials of the Gothic through the Jungian lens, because it's all about dark, light, day, night, good, evil, all these binaries, these binomials that are characteristic of the Gothic, and the otherness, the uncanny, all the unconscious. We still don't know so much, all the archetypal world that is so rich, and we can see so many examples of when we're analyzing a text through Gothic, a Gothic text through this lens. So I hope that you've liked this, and that if that's the case, that you share the video with other people that you follow, you click on the bell and all that, and that you leave me a comment. I would really appreciate if this is something that could interest you. It's an invitation again. We're gonna go into the Gothic Descent, and let's try to work this out together. I mean, I'm sure we're gonna find and we're gonna learn loads of things. I'll be recommending you readings, books, and then if this grows, then we might take it outside the channel and work together somewhere else. But anyways, until then, I hope that you've liked this one, episode 16, that you have a great Halloween, and or if you celebrate All Saints Day, or whatever that is, in wherever you are in the world, that you have a bit of a thought. And if you like this content as well, I have a free newsletter every month. This month it comes out on the 21st of every month, so by the time you see this video, that newsletter would have probably gone. Well, it would have gone, but in there I talk about the cultural aspects of this Jungian lens through the Gothic literature, what happens between the 21st of each month to the 21st of the next month, and it's totally free. And then if you're in that list, you'll be informed of, you'll be the first one to know of new things coming up, like this video or future content. So I hope you've liked it. Thumbs up, share, all that, and happy Halloween again, and I hope to see you very soon in next episode. Until then, don't forget to be very Gothic, my friend. Bye bye.